Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and joining me today, once again, been a little bit of a doldrum since the last time he was here, but we are spiking up the interest once again in the Hammercast. We've got none other than Pat Flynn, and we're going to be talking about fat loss simplified. And whenever I have a question about fat loss, I always turn to him because he's really quite the expert at it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about fat loss, and in particular, how to stop overcomplicating it. And as always, I always like to tell my gentle listeners that if you have not, you should also get my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. It's not really specifically designed for fat loss, but it will help you along the way because it's got a couple of full body gait pattern movements that are going to help engage every muscle and every nook, cranny, crevice, and corner of your soft machine. And as Pat will tell you, that is an important thing to do if you want to slice off, metaphorically speaking, that grody flab that you have accumulated from being sedentary and binging on Netflix and snack foods. So don't do it. But without further ado, Pat, welcome back to the Hammercast.
Alex, it is a delight to finally receive the invitation to come back on your podcast and to speak to, as you called them, your unwashed listeners. I'm really looking forward to
this. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And by the way, I got to say, if you're listening to this on iTunes, you won't be able to see this. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see that there are a couple books in the background, one of which I've noticed is quite green. What is this called? How to Be Better at parentheses almost everything by Pat Flynn.
Dude, so that's the title of my book, and somebody alerted me on Twitter that for like the past however many years since this book has come out, I've had the wrong title. So I have on Twitter, my bio said author of How to Be Better at Almost Anything. So apparently I don't even know the title of my own book.
Actually, the thing about the title that is funny is that it does have several words that are interchangeable in it. Like I used to call it How to Get Better at Almost Everything.
That's right. Almost anything or something. Nobody gets it right. One word is always messed up. Yeah. Including by the author himself. Yeah.
Exactly. So folks, if you did that, don't feel bad. It's like, you're in good company because the very author of the book has made that same mistake. And I see you've got another book in there. It looks like it's got a Superman symbol in it, but it's written in what appears to be Chinese.
That is the same book translated into a foreign tongue.
Is it Chinese?
It is indeed. In fact, I didn't know what it was at first because the publisher just sends me translations. So I got this box of books in the mail. I'm like, what is this book? I'm like, oh, it's my book. Tear it. It's backwards, right? So they read backwards apparently in China. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And they stuck with some funky colors. And I can't read a single word of it. Let me see if I can take it down here for people who are listening. Yeah, I mean, there is some English on the title there.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I actually might like this cover a little bit more. It's even more flamboyant than the original. So I dig it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they didn't get in trouble for the Superman logo either, or the suggestion that it's a Superman logo, which is kind of a cool thing. Right. I'll have to see if I can do something like that with like a Batman logo, or who knows? We'll find out. But at any rate, without further ado, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand because that's what we do. We talk shop. Certainly don't gossip about people in our industry. So
never, definitely not when the mics are off either. It's just always straight business. Yeah,
Exactly, correct. Purely professional. I can assure the gentle listener of that, or the unwashed listeners.
Right. Always above board. Yeah,
exactly.
Nothing lowbrow. Never.
Folks, if you only knew, Pat and I have talked about how, like, whenever I go out and visit him, we should just have a camera running just to catch all the hilarious stuff we come up with. We actually have some like ideas that I think would make great lowbrow reality shows. I'm really not at liberty to tell you because somebody might actually decide, okay, well, I'm going to take this idea and run with it. And
they're too good. They're too good to share until they are formally published.
Correct. Exactly. Or at least, copyrighted. So we're going to have to wait. But what we don't have to wait for is talking about fat loss made simple. And, there's a lot of information about fat loss out there, most of it bad, some of it very good. And Pat is on the right side of history in that regard. Right. And I'm curious in particular because, I've always been relatively lean and I've never had to go from being overweight to lean, but you have. So you've actually lived it and you've guided countless hundreds, maybe thousands of people into leaner living. So what are some of the things that people get wrong about fat loss, like right out of the gate?
Oh, wow. Starting off with the tough questions. Well, yeah, let me give a little background. So in my youth, I was covered in rolls. And the only sort of activities I ever took to were resting and eating. So did not have an athletic upbringing. It wasn't an athlete. Just ate a bunch of junk. And played a bunch of video games. So in fact, all of my friends would want to come to my house because I was the house in the neighborhood that had, quote, the cabinet of diabetes. And you can imagine what was in this cabinet. And it wasn't just the stuff that was in the cabinet. It was the fact that my household was so libertarian that you could access the cabinet at any time, right? Even right before dinner, after dinner. So it was free reign on the always fully stocked cabinet of diabetes. That built a lot of bad habits into me. It caused my body to have lumps and to be lumpy. And at some points, I both sort of had enough because I just didn't feel good. I didn't look good. And of course, when you're in like middle school and high school, your friends aren't shy about pointing these things out to you, right? So yeah, there was that. It wasn't like totally traumatic. I still had friends, but like I was the fat friend, right, who got picked on, which isn't particularly fun. And then I also had a doctor, and like you wish the world had more doctors like this who would actually tell you what you need rather than just what you want to hear or worried about being politically correct. And she said at some point, she's like, Pat, you're healthy now because you're, in the 8th grade, I think this was, but she didn't subscribe to this whole phony healthy at any size thing. So yeah, you're healthy at this snapshot in time, according to your blood work, but the trajectory you're on is not good. And she said, you could have a heart attack by the time you're 50. And, you really have to think about what sort of life do you want to live? What sort of diseases do you want to risk? How long do you want to live? And she said, if you keep on this path of eating poorly and being overweight and not taking your fitness or health seriously, yeah, it's just, here's what you're going to have to deal with in the future, just being very realistic. And I so appreciate the doctor of being just that honest with me. I mean, it probably would have been much easier for the doctor just to, give me the physical and just be like, oh yeah, you're fine, go on your way. But she actually staged a legit like intervention that made a difference. And so around that time, just to give a little bit more backstory, here's a somewhat embarrassing story. I was in a little middle school band. We had a couple fans back in the day. And after band practice, all guys, we decided, I didn't, but one of the other guys decided we were going to have a wet t-shirt contest among the guys, right? And I won. I got first place, and it was like super embarrassing. I pretended to laugh and all this and stuff, and like that was like it between the doctor and just yeah. I'm not blind. I knew what I looked like. I didn't feel good. I knew I was fat, right? I had a fat family. And so I was like, I just made the resolution in my mind. That's it. This is done. And the first thing I did is I went upstairs at my friend's house, was at the drummer's house. I opened his fridge and I ate an orange. I didn't know anything else about healthy eating, but I thought fruit seems healthy. I'm going to eat fruit. And eating that orange was the first step in a very long, windy, confusing, and complicated journey where I myself had to work through many mistakes about nutrition and eating and fitness. And one of them eventually was the idea that fruit makes you fat. It's like one of these myths, right? So it's funny, like my first intuition of like, this is how I get unfat. Later, I would deal with the information about this is the reason I am fat. Let me tell you guys, eating oranges was not the reason I was fat, right? Oranges and bananas and carrots or almonds, that wasn't why Pat Flynn was fat. Pat Flynn was fat because of General Tso's chicken. General Tso messes a lot of people up, right? Domino's pizza, chocolate marshmallow ice cream, sometimes for breakfast, right? Fritos, Doritos, Cheetos, breakfast cereals, school lunches, which were just all, dude, real quick, at my school lunch, you could literally get like a fried chicken sandwich, fries, and then a giant cookie. This is a school lunch program, man. So that's it. Oranges had nothing to, fruit did not make me fat, right? So let's just get that one right off the table. If you think fruit is the reason you're fat, we need to have a much deeper conversation. So how's that for an opening gambit, Alex? Where do you want to direct the conversation from here?
Well, I think that's perfect because, it's funny. To me, it never would have even occurred to me, even though I never really knew much growing up about, healthy eating, like, everybody knows the basic stuff, but it's incredible how many people are out there espousing this belief that fruit is going to make you fat. And why? Oh, there's sugar in it. Well, big deal, right? Like you said, these aren't the things that are making people fat.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things that I think first thing that people have to do, whether or not, you're an expert at the topic like Pat is, or whether or not you're a complete novice, is that you have to have a good BS detector. So we've got this as one of the things that should be sending off red flags in your BS detector that fruit is going to make you fat. Another one that I think would be good to talk about is the idea that calories don't matter.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Let's get into this.
Yeah, because I remember thinking this too, when I was now I never really taught anybody this sort of a thing, but I kind of subscribed to this idea that, it has a lot more to do with your hormones than it does with calories in and calories out. The reality is that, your weight is a multifaceted thing, but the idea that, calories really have no bearing on your weight couldn't be more wrong. It's not even just like mistaken. It's like it just is a lie. Like you can't tell somebody that like, oh, you can eat 5,000 calories a day of good food and only burn 2,000 of those calories, and you're not going to put on any weight. Like,
yeah, it's
just not how it works.
yeah, it's almost like so let's return to some basic principles. So first off, just like to cut right to the chase, like what do we know sort of works in the best research that we have and the longest and widest sort of view of human experience. And it's this: calories matter, right? Because when you compare different diets, study after study, review after review, you find that the different once you control for calories, once you fix for calories, pretty much everything else comes out in the wash, right? Again and again and again. High carb, low carb, this protocol versus that protocol. As soon as you start to fix and control for calories, you realize like this is the master control system, right? So I don't think that there's really any reasonable way to get around the fact that calories do matter, right? I just don't think that there is. Now that isn't to say that just everybody should do calorie counting. However, I think that's the other mistake that people make. So we can kind of affirm two things, right? We can affirm that calories matter, but you can control calories in a number of different ways, right? And calorie counting is a method. It works well for some people, but it also tends to be really tedious and can in some ways be counterproductive for other people. So you can acknowledge that calories matter and that anything else we're doing should take that into consideration. But there's many ways of manipulating your caloric intake that don't involve just a tedious sort of weighing and measuring every single thing that you eat. So I think that's the basic principle. So let's get basic principles first, and we can maybe get into more specific approaches. So here's what really seems to matter when it comes to weight loss. One is that your eating matters, right? Exercise is important, but the sort of thing that makes the biggest difference is your eating. It is really difficult. I want to say it's impossible, but it is really difficult to out exercise a bad eating program. Minimally, it's inefficient, right? If not impossible for most people. So if you care about body composition and fat loss, you need to pay good attention to nutrition. Exercise is important. They're mutually reinforcing. So people who have good workouts and exercise, they typically feel better and are more motivated to eat better, and vice versa. So I almost always recommend it's a both and, it's not an either or, right? But definitely nutrition matters. So here's what kind of comes out in the research. Calories matter. Protein intake matters. Protein is one of those sort of hinge factors as well, right? That good things happen when you eat more protein, especially lean protein. It tends to increase satiety. It tends to bring calories down, partly, again, because everything's connected. If it increases satiety, you're less hungry, you have less cravings, you probably eat less overall, right? Helps to ensure, performance and muscle recovery. It's more sort of metabolically expensive in terms of a macronutrient. So focusing on protein, getting protein up is a good thing. And there's different ranges here, maybe 0.5 to a gram per pound of lean body weight per day, I think is a generally decent range for most people. Some people go much higher than that. You can go in the higher end if you want. But I think it's important to just understand there's a range where people can have success, right? So calories matter. Protein matters. I think another thing that's really important for nutrition and eating and body composition is some type of cyclicality. This is one that's often missed. So even though calories matter, it does seem that it might not be the best approach to just like drive calories really low for a really long amount of time. You do experience, so even though like the idea of starvation mode is one of those myths, Alex, like it's really hard to actually reach actual starvation mode. You do see in the research metabolic downshifting and adaptations, right, which can make the fat loss process a little bit more difficult, more tedious. Your energy, your natural energy decreases. Why? Because your body's trying to preserve more. And in fact, you'll notice different things, and this is what they find in research. Your NEAT, your sort of non-exercise, sort of aerobic activity and stuff like that goes down. Where if you're dieting hard for a long time, you'll notice you probably fidget less and stuff like that. Just naturally, that's your body just conserving energy, right? So your body's smart, right? If you're taking in less, it will find ways to adjust in ways that you might not even be aware of. So there's a study done, I think it was in 2019, is a good one. I've referenced it before, and we can put it in the show notes, where they compared two groups, and one group was just, kind of calories put, I think it was like 30% below maintenance, just consistently across the board. And another one was, so 7 days a week, calories are just suppressed, right? And the other group was, it was something like 5 days a week below maintenance, and then 2 consecutive days where they bumped calories back up. So they had like 2 strategic refeed days. That wasn't going crazy, right? It wasn't just eating the whole hog, but you boosted calories. I think they increased carb intake a little bit more. And what they found is that that group did just as well in terms of fat loss and weight loss, but even better in terms of not as much metabolic downshifting and preserving lean muscle mass and stuff like that. So the cyclical approach, where you still have, so overall, right, what's the overall caloric trend? It's still down. So calories still matter, but having a bit of waviness or cyclicality seemed to be very helpful physiologically. I want to say that's probably also because it's helpful psychologically, right? Like knowing that you have some days that are just going to be a little bit easier and it's not going to be a grind every single day actually makes a lot of sense in terms of how that could be less stressful and more sustainable. In the same way, Alex, that we recommend cyclicality in training. Not every workout should be just take no prisoners, balls to the walls, right? You're going to burn out. You're going to get hurt probably at some point. I don't care how disciplined you are. If you keep just trying to redline it day in and day out, at some point you're going to break, right? So what do we recommend for intelligent training? We recommend a cyclical approach, right? Some days are more intense than others, some weeks, some months, even some years, I think, should be more intense than others. So I want to say that very wise insight that we have sort of naturally with physical exercise, it's kind of amazing that people don't think about applying that to eating as well. We should have a cyclical way of eating. So calories matter, getting protein up helps, and then finding a way to cycle your caloric intake is really helpful. And there's many different strategies for that. I'll just mention 2 real quickly, and we'll go back to you that I think are really helpful. And again, are well supported in the research. One is using strategic meal replacements. What does that mean? Just have protein shakes, right? Does a lot of good, right? So, or partial meal replacement therapy, as it's sometimes called in the research. Again, protein shakes, high quality protein shake, throw some fruit in there, won't make you fat. Throw some healthy fats in there, won't make you fat. Some avocado, some extra fiber if you want. What's not to like about that? Getting lots of protein, lots of micronutrients. It's fast, it's convenient, it fills you up, fuels your workouts, and it's hard to go overboard on the calories with something like that. So it just like helps to automatically constrain your calories with a lot of high quality, good stuff. So what I do for myself, I've been doing this for really since high school, right? So it's super sustainable, is I'll replace just 1 or 2 meals a day with just a shake. As simple as that, right? So easy way to keep the kind of calories suppressed. And then if I am having a day where I need a little bit more, or a different phase where I need a little bit more, I'll eat a little bit more. But the shakes are really good for that. And then either in addition to that or instead of that, I think just various methods of fasting are always very practical for people. But the key I like to emphasize, Alex, is understand the principles first. And once you have the principles of sort of, I need to operate within these boundaries if I want to be successful, then there's a lot of room to play. Then there's a lot of room to say, okay, I think this is going to be an approach that works good for me. So yeah, these principles, we need these principles for pretty much everybody, but I kind of think of it as like a playground, and it's a weird playground because it's a playground that's like on like a precipice, right? I don't know who would design this. And there's a fence around the playground, and the fence is like the principles. This is the weird image I have in my mind. If you stay inside the fence, you're going to have a good time. It's a playground. Who's not going to have a good time at the playground? The tire swing and all that. If you go outside of the fence, you fall off the cliff and die, right? So think of the principles. You stay inside the fence, you're going to have a good time. Everyone's happy. You go outside the fence, I can't help you anymore.
Immediate funeral.
Right? Yeah, we're in danger zone, right? You start carrying, you don't care about calories, you don't care about trying to get your protein up. You don't think about maybe having a sort of cyclical nature to your eating program. You're just ignoring all these principles. I don't care that you're doing paleo or Mediterranean or keto anymore at that point, if that makes sense. If you had these principles in place, then you want to take a paleo approach or a Mediterranean approach or whatever, fine. I think all those can be fine for many different people. And that's when like preferences and stuff like that comes into play.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know I know Alan Aragon talks about this a lot. He's a very well-known nutrition expert. And one of the things he's pointed out, I think also, your friend Spencer Nadolski, who's an obesity specialist.
Right. Yeah, I've been fortunate to be surrounded by people who are really, just top level with this type of stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I'm reiterating here is stuff that I learned from Dr. Nadolski and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, and he's a legitimate doctor. This is a specialty. So I mean, like when guys like him are reading the research, or Alan Aragon, who's
he's an obesity medicine specialist.
Exactly.
Not like the kind of doctor that Alex is, which is
Dr. Love. Which is a perfectly good doctor, by the way.
It's a fine doctor.
Fine doctor. But yeah, this is one of the things that he's pointed out a lot. I think Alan Aragon.
You have to cue the Kiss song at that point when you edit this
podcast.
podcast.
I'm gonna have to figure out a way to edit that in, because I usually do all the editing for these podcasts. So, folks, if I can't figure it out, I want you to at least go listen to Dr. Love. Like,
have it in your ear, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the big takeaway is that one of the things that they point out is that there are a lot of methods that work for losing weight, but none of them are really. But the reason that they work is because they work within these principles. So, I'm a big fan of fasting. And I think that, even though they say, fasting doesn't have any special properties, I really think that some of the benefits of it, and Pat, I think you would agree, particularly for like religious purposes in particular. Yeah. This is like learning about how to be disciplined, how to be focused.
Right. So let me say this real quick, because fasting is interesting. I think it's right to say that fasting largely works for weight loss because it helps to control calories. However, there are indications in the research. There was a study published in Cell Metabolism not too long ago that fasting specifically has other benefits irrespective of weight loss.
Exactly.
And in that sense, I think fasting stands in a unique category. And these benefits are hormonal, metabolic, cellular, and stuff like that. I'll try and we can maybe link some stuff in the show notes. But
sure.
But no, primarily there is wide agreement that the reason fasting works for weight loss is because it does help to control calories, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so some of these special properties, like what you were just mentioning, are irrespective of fat loss. And so the mistake that some people make is thinking, oh, well, this is like the ideal way to lose fat. And, our friend Jordan Syatt, for example, is another great example of somebody who knows a lot about fat loss. He's pointed out might be very good for some people. But people who have a tendency to binge eat, it would not be very good for, because it would just be encouraging a habit that they have that is not a very good habit. So you do have to be cautious in how you apply it. So one takeaway that you should have right off the bat is, going back to what Pat said, is you need these principles in which you can work a whole lot of different things. And some of it will come down to preference. But one thing you have to realize is that there is no one diet that is right for absolutely everybody.
Yes, that's correct. And look, what you said about Jordan, good man. He's a good man. I haven't talked to him in a while. I have to catch up with him. This is so common sense. It's amazing that people sometimes forget about this. It's like, oh man, every time you have a single beer, you go on like a 3-week bender and then end up in like
disappear from work.
Yeah, maybe like you just shouldn't have beer anymore, right? Like every time you fast, like you just completely lose all control of yourself, right? It's like, but yeah, let's look, we can hit these principles and find a different approach. So things like frequency, eating frequency, is one of those things that you can vary according to an individual, and people can have success with body composition and weight loss, eating at a higher frequency or a lower frequency. So fasting is a tool that can help achieve or help to apply some of these principles, but it's far from the only tool. And if it works well for you, if you like it, awesome. And fasting itself is variable, right? Fasting could just mean like pushing breakfast back a little bit too. So this is the other thing I think people get confused about fasting. They think like, oh man, I haven't exercised in 30 years. just been cigarettes and beer and corn chips. And now I'm going to do like a 3 week long fast, right? Of course, you're probably going to die, right? I mean, it's like, that is not at all reasonable. And that'd be like somebody who doesn't exercise for 30 years and only eats cigarettes. And then they go and do like attempt like an Ironman or something like that. It's just like, it's so unreasonable. No, like, let's just start with a walk. Well, you can do the same thing with fasting, right? You can do the equivalent of walking with fasting, which is, hey, instead of breakfast at 7 a.m., I'm going to have my first meal at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. And you can just, and as you get used to that and gain control of yourself. And I think that's one of the hidden benefits of fasting. And, the psychological and the physiological are deeply linked, right? And I think you can use one to help try and train and assist with the other. Is fasting does give opportunities to become like comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? To say, okay, I'm hungry right now. It's a little uncomfortable, but I don't, I'm going to practice responding, not reacting. That's what I want to say. I'm going to and that's sort of what mastery of self is all about, right? We have all these appetites and emotions that are pulling us in many different directions. A lot of us are just reactionary. Boom. We just react to it, and we often give in to temptations and make less than ideal decisions because of it. I want to say that if you go into this with a lot of awareness and you're prudent and reasonable in your approach, you can learn to respond rather than react, and then begin to get greater self-control and self-discipline. And I think fasting is a tool for that can help you achieve that. But you have to, of course, give yourself, I'll go back to the cliche, be like, be challenged but successful with whatever you do. Be challenged but successful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier that I'd like to underline, because I thought it was a really good parallel, talking about how with training we have to keep in mind we can't redline it and go as hard as possible each and every time. You have to vary it. There has to be a cycle, like light, medium, hard, that sort of a thing. In a lot of ways, I think people kind of instinctively understand that almost better with dieting than they do with training. Like, they have to be taught, no, you can do actually mostly light and medium workouts and do really, really well. And most people instinctively know, like, okay, if I have a piece of cake every once in a while, it's not going to be the end of the world. I think the problem is that a lot of people, when they decide they're going to make some sort of a change, they end up like overthinking it. And they end up thinking, okay, now there must be some sort of like a secret. There must be some sort of like a ninja hack, biohack trick that I can do. And so they start thinking in terms of what I like to call like thinking more like at the finish line than at the starting line. Yes. And it's like an example of this in the world of training is that most trainees will start off, from my experience, will start off being like, okay, I need to do bicep curls and tricep extensions, and I need to make sure that I'm hitting the long head of my triceps. So I'm going to do this variation, and then I'm going to do, and it's like, you know what? If you just do like some push-ups, you'll be pretty well covered for the triceps and chest and the shoulders. Do some rows. It's going to hit your back. It's going to get your biceps. When you've got those things down, then it might make more sense to work on the advanced stuff like isolation movements to hit specific muscles. But until then, you should be trying to paint with broad brushstrokes.
Yeah, and get the fundamentals now.
Yeah, with diet, I think people do the same thing. They're like, they want the ninja hacks because they think that's 80% of it. When the reality is that it's like, in many cases, like a fraction of a percent. That's really only going to help them later on down the line.
Yeah, that's right. And what are these principles? Caloric control, protein, and cyclicality. Those are like the three things I would want people to really take away from this conversation. And then how that gets applied in your life, there's a range of options there of how you want to do it, right? You can use strategic meal replacements. The other thing that does matter, another principle is like, I guess trying to like stay pretty distant from the standard American diet as well. What do we mean by that? Avoiding hyper palatable foods. This is a key, right? And what are hyper palatable foods? Well, the foods that like are attached to the slogan, you can't eat just one of them, right? Yeah. Anything that is advertised like that.
Anything that has a slogan, you should probably avoid.
Right. Yeah. So like the chips. I mean, like, just your piggy standard American diet, the Oreos, the bread puddings. Essentially don't eat like an American, right? That should be the diet, right? Now, what's the opposite of that? Well, foods that are minimally processed, close to nature, focusing on lean proteins. Occasional fatty protein is fine here and there, right? But leaner proteins tend to give you more bang for your buck, fish and chicken and turkey and all that. good quality carbohydrates, rice, brown rice, quinoa, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, fruit, which does not make you fat, good option, especially berries. I mean, like, dang, man, you can eat like a million strawberries for like 2 calories, right?
Yeah.
Delicious. Yeah, staying away from stuff and a lot of stuff that just comes in bags with a million different ingredients, right? Now, because we're afraid of chemicals, but because these foods tend to be hyper palatable in the sense that like they get a response from you. They're not satiating. They sort of like invoke even further cravings. We've all been there. We know what I'm talking about. So yeah, trying to get that crap out, not just of your mouth, but of your house. And that's another one of the principles. So we're going up to 5 principles here. So what we have calories matter, protein, cyclicality, avoid hyperpalatable foods. And the 5th one I think is important is general environment. General environment, right? Who you hang around with and where you hang around with makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It's like, man, I don't care how motivated you are. Like all your friends are losers. No offense.
I said no offense.
I said no offense, so you can't get mad. All right. They're just dragging you down, right? They're trying to pollute you. They're trying to pollute your mind. They definitely pollute your body. Do you think, ask them, like, do you think that you could be successful in this environment, no matter what, regardless if I tell you all the secrets? And yeah, he honestly said no. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Yeah, you have to change your environment, right?
Yeah.
You have to, if you're serious about success, here's what I want to say. You need structures working with you, not against you. You need external structures working with you, not against you.
Yeah.
And that might mean changing your circle groups, cleaning out your house, like the stuff that's going to tempt you, just get it out. Get it out. Like change your environment in as many ways as you can. You want your environment pushing you towards your goal. At very least, not holding you back, but definitely not pushing you away from your goal.
Yeah.
That's something people fail to consider that is critical for success in any area of life. I don't care if it's nutrition, exercise, but business, especially career success, your environment makes a big difference. The cliches of like, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. There's a lot of truth to those.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is true no matter what, because if you're going to try to emulate the people that you're around, I mean, humans are essentially very social creatures, and so your environment cannot be ignored. And ideally, like what Pat's talking about, is you want to try to put yourself in an environment that has the least amount of friction possible in the direction you're trying to go. Because if you're always swimming upstream, eventually you're going to get tired out, and the stream is going to pull you back. So you need to find a different stream going in a better direction. You're still going to have to swim. You can't just like laze around and just be, dragged in that direction. You can, it's just going to take a lot longer to get to where you want to go. So you're still going to have to apply effort. But if you are not constantly going against the grain, it becomes so much easier to do. Some of this stuff takes a long time. I can say for me, for example, I have a pretty healthy diet for the most part. So when I go out and buy groceries, I don't have to keep myself away from the hyperpalatable foods. It's just never on my list of things to get. And I still, once or twice a week, I'll go out and I'll have some junk food. But then once that's done, I just don't have any desire for it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yesterday I went to Jersey Mike's, got the chicken chili cheesesteak, which makes the entire city of Philadelphia irrelevant.
Yeah.
And
as do many other factors, but that's an especially large one.
But that was like my higher calorie thing. So like it doesn't have to be completely. Now look, again, everybody's different. So I've got a friend. His name is Dr. Jim.
Good old Dr. Jim.
And Jim knows himself very well. So he knows that there's just certain things are like trigger foods for him. And like bread is one of those, right? So he doesn't take like a moderate approach to bread. Like he just doesn't do bread at all. And I think that's good to have that awareness. I know that there's certain like trigger foods for me. Anything that's answerable to the description of cheesy and poofy would be one of those, right? But like I've also come to learn, like, okay, I can do bread and it doesn't like set me off on like a huge bender or anything like that. So, when I want to bump my calories or have a lunch out, yeah, sure, I'll have Jersey Mike. So, these are things this is where the individual matters too, right? You get the principles down, you stay within those principles, and then you will do testing. It's like, okay, look, if I've tested this out and like that just really doesn't work for me, it's okay, fine. Get rid of it. Try something else out, right? And this is why, like, I don't I don't endorse like everything in moderation. I think moderation works well for some people. I think for other people, it's a complete disaster, right? Some people should not moderate, right? Like the person who's been an alcoholic, probably moderation is a bad idea for them, right?
Yeah.
Like just be a complete teetotaler at that point. And look, honestly, some way for some people like Jim, he's sort of the same way about food. Like he just doesn't touch sort of like any quote unquote junk food at all in any moderation because he knows that for him, it just sets him off. It just feels terrible. He doesn't really need it or want it in his life anyways. Of course, he still boosts his calories, right? So he's not just like constantly in a major state of deprivation, but when he boosts his calories, he'll do it with like sushi or something like that, right?
Right.
And that's a man who's been willing to stay within the fence in the playground and just, experiment around a little bit and really tailor a successful approach for himself. So maybe that will be helpful and encouraging to people that, again, it's not one size fits all. There is room for experimentation and individualization. Mm-hmm.
I definitely think so. Now, on the topic, we talked about this earlier, in the topic of like exercise. One of the things that I've heard is that it's like, when it comes to fat loss and stuff like that, your diet is like the engine, but the exercise is like the gas pedal. And so if you get those two things reversed, it's very hard to keep things moving properly. But if you have the right exercise program, in addition to some of these different approaches to your eating, it can be a huge help. And how in particular, because I know that you're an expert on kettlebell training and particularly using it for fat loss, how do you design a challenge around kettlebell training that is going to help, let's say, supplement and amplify the effects of these lifestyle changes in your eating?
And as we've been told, we should trust the experts, shouldn't we, Alex?
Absolutely, unquestioningly.
Don't question.
So no questions for Pat, please.
Yeah, no, I think I think challenges are good. I offer challenges to my audience a number of times a year. I think they can be very motivating. They can give you an initial push, but whatever a challenge does, it should set you up with it should put you into a certain disposition to carry on long term. And like I said, we don't want to be doing challenges nonstop year round. At the same time, it doesn't mean we never want to do challenges. It makes sense sometimes to really just to push that gas pedal down and hit it hard in many areas of life, right? So again, cyclicality. But in terms of general structure or training structure, again, I go back to the basics. I think if you care about body composition and being a generalist, meaning having like robust general physical preparedness, I think you should have 2 to 4 days a week of your traditional strength and hypertrophy work. Having more lean muscle helps you burn more calories automatically rather than just manually. So strength and muscle building work, just your traditional fundamental lifts, high degree of neuromuscular facilitation, 6 to 12-ish rep range for a lot of the muscle building stuff, less reps, heavier weight for more of the strength and power stuff is really helpful. Makes you look good. It's metabolically expensive and can be quite minimalist. So again, I give ranges 2 to 4 days a week. I think is plenty for most people, depending where they're at. Walking and mobility every single day, I think is really important. This is where your stuff comes in, Alex. A lot of the groundwork, a lot of the crawling work, I think is just money in the bank. It's very restorative, but it still keeps you active. It still burns calories. It makes you feel good. I do recommend trying to take a 20 to 60-minute brisk walk every day. Walking is just one of the simplest things you can do to improve your health in all sorts of ways. Obviously burns calories and burns fat, but it makes you feel good. Hopefully you get outside, you get some sunshine, walk, talk, I don't know, listen to this annoying podcast, educate the brain. So that's good. And then I would say, maybe a day or two a week of some more of the Bernie stuff, right? I'm a big fan of metabolic complexes. I think the sort of killer app of kettlebells are complexes where you can string together multiple exercises and tax, the different muscle groups and energy systems simultaneously. So very metabolically expensive, very intense. Gets the endorphins going. It's like those feel good workouts, those real burner workouts. I've got 1 million of them on my YouTube channel. And so if you have a general structure like that, we're kind of think of it as a pyramid, right? I think of the exercise pyramid. The bottom is the stuff you consume the most of. That's walking and mobility. Do that every day. Then the middle of the pyramid, 2 to 4 days a week, you have your kind of strength and hypertrophy work. And then at the top of the pyramid, maybe 1 to 3 days a week, that's the frosting on the cake, if you will. That's the more shorter sessions. They can be like 10 to 20 minutes, not to be long, high intensity, kettlebell complexes, metabolic conditioning, even sprints. Sprints are great. Throw those in there. I think you're going to have pretty much all the bases covered there. Going to rip the fat right off your body, as Alex likes to say. But it's very effective, very sustainable, and it's going to help you. It's going to help you be a generalist, which is something that I'm interested in.
Yeah. Now, as I recall, you've got a new challenge coming out shortly called Kettlebell Blitz. I know that you can't give away too many details. Is there anything in particular that we can know without giving away the farm?
Indeed. Well, here's the deal. It's kind of like a 7-day push that we're doing into our next programming cycle for Strong On. So Strong On is my my general cool kids club where people come and they just get generalist kettlebell programming from me. It's awesome and it's fantastic. And I can't say enough good things about it because I made it. And so I program different cycles throughout the year because that's what you do when you do programming. And occasionally before we enter a new cycle, we like to do a challenge, right? This is a time where we hit the gas pedal a little bit more. So Kettlebell Blitz is a sort of 7-day intense push of kettlebell complex training that we're going to use for a variety of different means. Some of the complexes are strength focused. Some of them are longer endurance focused. Some are mobility focused. So we're using, I think, the highly versatile tool of complexes, which allows our training to be very minimalist, to hit a lot of the different aspects of athleticism, burn a bunch of calories, and we have a pretty sweet, crafty eating plan that comes along with it that is meant to burn the blubber. And it will feature a lot of the principles. It's really the principles we talk about in application. So we're going to have calorie cycling. We're going to have strategic meal replacements. We're going to have some awesome recipes that will just help make your food selections very easy. And with those two pieces in place, I think people are going to be very pumped and excited about the results they see in 7 days. 7 days might not seem like a long amount of time, but we've done a number of these before, and realistically, people tend to lose like 5 to 7 pounds of fat and fluid and bloat, and it's very inspiring. And of course, it's not meant to just like you end everything after 7 days. This is just like a good motivational push, a rush of results to set you up for the next programming cycle. And people will continue it for longer than 7 days as well. So that's called Kettlebell Blitz. And the only way you can get access to that right now is if you're on my email list, and you can get on my email list at the website 101kettlebellworkouts.com. That's the numbers 101kettlebellworkouts.com.
Yeah, if you go to the show notes, you're going to find a link to 101kettlebellworkouts.com. So if you are interested in that, or if you're listening in the future and Kettlebell Blitz has come and gone, you can still get on his email list. And I suggest that you do. I read his emails every day. They're always very entertaining. Always a lot of good information as well. So 101kettlebellworkouts.com, highly recommended. If you can get started with it, Kettlebell Blitz will be a good way for you to be able to take your shirt off or wear a swimsuit and feel confident in yourself this spring and summer. Everyone's going to want to see those washboard abs and, those guns. So this would be the way to get started. So Pat, thank you very much for being on the show.
Pleasure, Alex, and thank you to the Unwashed listeners. Really appreciate it.
As always. And folks, thank you very much for listening. Have fun and happy training.